Hello and welcome to part 2 of my Being a Vegeta Fan is Hard series. I suggest watching part 1 first, but if you don't want to, then don't. I'm going to pick up from where I left off, but first I would just like to say something. I'm a bit of an odd DBZ fan. I don't know how many people are even going to be able to relate to my reasons for watching the show in the beginning, but I'm just going to be honest and say that I was very uninterested in DBZ at first. I thought that it was stupid, and I remember changing the channel in annoyance many times when I would see it playing on Toonami. Giant monkeys smashing rocks and guys flying around kicking and punching each other and shooting lasers out of their eyes really just seemed dumb to me. However, I encountered DBZ so many times during my channel flipping that I eventually gave up. Alright, Cartoon Network, you want me to watch this stupid show so bad? Fine, I'll watch it. So I started watching it and I immediately noticed that Vegeta was a huge asshole. He was being mean to everyone. He tried to kill all the other characters on Earth. And then even on Namek, he was always lurking in the shadows and harassing everyone and being a huge jerk. And I remember thinking, hey, this guy hates all these other characters just like I do. You're alright, Vegeta. You're one of the good ones. And I'm fully aware of how ridiculous that is, but it's the truth. I originally liked Vegeta because he was a villain, and I thought it was funny that he was giving everyone in the show such a hard time. He had no alliance to anyone. He was a lone wolf wreaking havoc and causing problems for everyone else. And I thought that was hilarious. Now, my reasons for liking Vegeta became more complicated as the show progressed, and some of the other characters did grow on me over time. I like Krillin quite a lot. He's easily my second favorite. Piccolo and Tien I like more or less equally, and of course I like Bulma and I ship her and Vegeta pretty hard, but it's important to understand that I loved Vegeta even when he was a bad guy who had virtually no redeeming qualities, and I wasn't sitting on the edge of my seat waiting for his redemption arc. I didn't think that would happen, and him becoming a good guy surprised me. Vegeta has always been my favorite character. He was originally the only reason that I watched the show, and he has always been the main reason that I kept watching it. There's no point in denying my bias. It's pretty obvious that I'm a Vegeta fangirl, or a Vegeta simp, or whatever else you want to call me. Those are all titles that I will fully embrace. I don't consider those to be insults. I have a lot of emotional attachment to Vegeta for various reasons, but having said that, I'm aware that he is not a well-written character, and loving him has caused me no small amount of grief over the years. Some of the most intense arguments that I ever got into on the internet during my youth have been about Vegeta. I really used to get into it with some people. I don't know if any fictional character has instilled such a range of emotions in me. Emotions like anger, disappointment, sympathy, and love. I still have a lot to say about Vegeta, and I almost don't know where to begin, but I'll try to find a starting point here and pick up from where I left off in part 1. Vegeta is very unlikable during the Android and Cell sagas, and I think part of that is that he doesn't have much of a reason to be fighting the androids or Cell. His pride also gets pretty out of control during those sagas to the point where even I found it annoying. DBZ also follows a very flawed, nonsensical story structure that involves the main characters getting huge power-ups, and then their enemies are just always stronger. This keeps happening over and over with seemingly no end to it. I mean, they literally went to another planet and fought Space Hitler, and then they go back to Earth and then there are robots that are even more powerful. It's just stupid. So it isn't just Vegeta's behavior that's the problem, but having said that, there's no denying that he's very obnoxious in these sagas. I don't know why Toriyama insists on oversimplifying Vegeta and making literally everything Vegeta does be because of his pride. It's also not even clear if Vegeta's pride is a good or a bad thing. It was Vegeta's pride that made him allow Cell to become complete. And Trunks even says Vegeta's pride is his only weakness. But then later Trunks says that Vegeta's pride is what attracted Bulma to him in the first place. And then he's like, and me too. So you admire your father's pride even though you said earlier that his pride is a bad thing? And Bulma was attracted to Vegeta's pride, or his greatest weakness? What are you even talking about? I think the reason Bulma was attracted to Vegeta is fairly obvious, but if you really don't know, I'll tell you. From a woman's perspective, it's because she did not believe he was a bad person. She thought that there was more to Vegeta and that she could help him or change him. Now, whether that was naive of her or not is not the point. The point is that's clearly how she felt. This is something that some women do. It's a fairly common thing for women to do, actually. In fact, it's so common that you can easily find jokes about these sorts of relationships in various forms of media.
Well, most women will tell you that you're a fool to think you can change a man, but those women are quitters. When I first met your father, he was loud, crude, and piggish. But I worked hard on him, and now he's a whole new person.
Mom?
He's a whole new person, Lisa.
You're like an abandoned building that ought to be condemned. You know, busted windows, rats running around, a real nasty sewage situation. But maybe if the right person got a hold of it and cleans it up, maybe they could take that disgusting building and turn it into something not so disgusting.
There's also this clip from a filler episode that supports my theory, and yes, I know filler is not canon, but there really isn't much interaction between Vegeta and Bulma in DBZ. Toriyama just doesn't explain anything about their relationship to any satisfying degree, so we have to work with what we've got here. In regard to Vegeta's pride being a strength of his, I'm just not sure I believe it. When Vegeta was working for or was enslaved by Frieza, do you think it was Vegeta's pride that allowed him to survive as long as he did? Does that look like pride to you? It looks more like suppressed anger to me. It looks more like he's battling his pride and controlling or mastering it through willpower. His pride is making it harder for him to remain subservient, and therefore making it more difficult for him to survive. In the Buu saga, Vegeta swallows his pride when he allows Babidi to take control of him and release Vegeta's hidden power. Then once Vegeta's gotten the power that he wanted, he resists Babidi's magic and refuses to obey his orders. He only wants to fight Goku, and he will not obey Babidi even though it causes him a lot of pain to resist. The show very oddly even comes right out and tells us that it's Vegeta's pride that allowed him to resist. Vegeta says, "You may have taken my mind and my body, but you'll never have my pride." And Babidi says that no one has ever been able to resist his magic before, and he's baffled that Vegeta is able to do this. So Vegeta's pride, otherwise known as his greatest weakness, is also his greatest strength, and it allowed him to do something that no one else in the universe has ever been able to do. Just keep contradicting yourself, Toriyama. Keep writing Vegeta in an inconsistent, stupidly simplistic way, and I will keep calling you out on it. Remember in part 1 how I talked about how Toriyama doesn't understand the concept of show don't tell? Well, let's ignore what we're being told, which is a bunch of contradictory information anyway, and let's focus on what we see happening in the show. I would argue that Vegeta's greatest strength is his willpower and determination, not his pride. He had to set his pride aside or suppress it to allow Babidi to control him and unleash his power in the first place. Then after establishing that Vegeta's pride is a weakness that he had to overcome to become stronger, the show then wants us to believe that Vegeta's pride is so incredibly strong that it allowed him to break free of Babidi's control. That's very contradictory. I understand that Vegeta is proud, there's no denying that, but Vegeta's pride is a character trait that he has. He isn't the embodiment of pride, and not everything he does is dictated by pride. Vegeta's real strength is his conviction, and he can control his pride through willpower, if he feels like he needs to. In my opinion, it is not pride that is allowing Vegeta to resist Babidi's magic. It's his complete and utter refusal to give up, even in the face of great pain and suffering, otherwise known as willpower. He isn't unbreakable, but it takes a lot for him to give up. He tries as hard as he possibly can to get what he wants, and whether you like this character or not, that's impressive. He does not want to be controlled. He wants to be free to do as he pleases. He wasn't free to do as he pleased when he served Frieza, and that was a source of shame and frustration for him. It hurt his pride to obey Frieza, but he did it for years because surviving was more important to him at the time. Babidi trying to control him now may be bringing those past feelings of shame and anger to the surface, and that anger coupled with his desire to fight Goku is giving him the strength to resist. I don't know why the show is always going on and on about Vegeta's pride, because frankly his willpower has always been much more impressive to me. His pride, or it would really be more accurate to call it his arrogance, is a character flaw that tends to cloud his judgment. It was Vegeta's resolve, his refusal to be controlled or dominated by someone else, that allowed him to resist Babidi's magic. And it was his willpower that allowed him to control his pride and bow to Frieza because he knew that that was what he had to do in order to survive. And when the opportunity finally arose for Vegeta to have some sort of chance at defeating Frieza, he took it, because he is proud. But that's not all that he is. Another funny thing that I would like to point out that supports my theory of Vegeta's willpower being his greatest strength is that Vegeta is the only Saiyan that willed himself into becoming a Super Saiyan. He trained so relentlessly to attain that power. He was absolutely obsessed with becoming a Super Saiyan. No Saiyan ever wanted that more than Vegeta did. The dub translates this incorrectly. In the dub, Vegeta says that he didn't care anymore, which is the opposite of what happened. Not caring anymore never would have caused him to transform. He did care, a lot. That's why he got so angry and upset. His transformation was triggered by an onslaught of emotion, not apathy, which is what not caring means. So in the Japanese version, when Vegeta could not transform after trying as hard as he possibly could, he got so upset that it triggered the transformation.
I wanna be a Super Saiyan! I wanna!
So the emotion that Vegeta experienced from being upset and angry with himself was on the same level of emotion that Goku experienced when he watched his best friend die. So, Vegeta's pretty hard on himself, and he's got some serious anger problems. Vegeta transforming essentially because he wanted it so badly is both impressive and kinda stupid, but it supports my overall point. At the time, Vegeta didn't care about anyone but himself. He didn't have some sort of outside trigger like the other characters did. Vegeta's reason for transforming is unique to the other characters. He did it entirely on his own. His feelings of shame and anger, him feeling inadequate or inferior to Goku, all comes from himself. This is another thing about Vegeta that I have always found interesting, that he is his own biggest critic. No one else cares that he isn't as strong as Goku. Even though he's royalty and elitist and believes that he's the best of the Saiyan race, his planet is gone, his people are dead, and there isn't anyone around to judge him for being second best. All those feelings of shame and inadequacy come from Vegeta and no one else. He has very high standards for himself, especially when it comes to being the strongest of his people. That's why he has such an intense rivalry with Goku. Being powerful, especially being the most powerful Saiyan, is everything to Vegeta. It's the one thing in his life that was always constant. Unlike Goku, Vegeta knows what it's like to not be the strongest person in the room all the time. He worked for Frieza for decades, and for most of his life, Vegeta was around many characters that were stronger than him. Remember on Namek when he was so apprehensive about fighting the Ginyu Force? I know a lot of that kind of goes out the window after he becomes a Super Saiyan, which is stupid and annoying to me, but that's a different conversation. Let's just focus on one thing at a time here. The reason Vegeta cares so much about Goku being stronger than him is because they are both Saiyans. You'll notice that Vegeta doesn't obsess over becoming stronger than Gohan, like he does with Goku. Probably because Gohan is not fully Saiyan. He just doesn't view Gohan the same way. Vegeta has believed since he was a child that he was the best of his people. Even if there were other characters of different races that were stronger than him, he always had the comfort of knowing that he was the strongest Saiyan, until Goku showed up. Unlike Goku, fighting isn't really a hobby for Vegeta. I'm sure he does enjoy it, but it isn't really a fun thing that he just does because he likes it. It's more something he feels like he has to do, probably because it's all he's ever known. In the Buu Saga, a frustrated Vegeta tells Gohan, "The strong survive and the weak die." He's been living on Earth for well over a decade at this point, and this harsh ideology is still very deeply ingrained in him. I can understand why, because for most of his life it was true. Being the strongest of his people is how Vegeta has always measured his self-worth. So when Goku bested him and continued to best him no matter how hard Vegeta tried, saying that Vegeta took it personally is putting it mildly. There's a kind of sadness to the character of Vegeta that isn't properly explored with any real depth. And even when the show does talk about it, oftentimes the horrible things Vegeta does wind up overshadowing or even completely eclipsing any sympathy the audience could potentially feel for him. It's a real shame because even though there's a lot to work with here, Toriyama seems to see Vegeta as more of a plot device rather than a character that the audience should be feeling for. The Majin Vegeta arc had potential, but the execution is really bad. Vegeta allows Babidi to take control of him and unleash his hidden power. Buu gets released largely because of Vegeta's selfishness and him wanting to settle things with Goku. I say largely because of Vegeta because it's also Goku's fault, because he could have stopped it. But clearly a lot of the blame lies with Vegeta. I don't like how Toriyama is always using Vegeta to advance the plot like this. I get tired of it for various reasons that I'll explain later. But ultimately, I don't have a huge problem with Buu's release being Vegeta's fault, or rather it's not the main problem. We all know Vegeta's a selfish person who puts his own desires before anyone else's, and that he's obsessed with fighting Goku. That's consistent with his character. I don't even have a problem with him ranting about not being able to catch up to Goku. I don't really care if his rant sounds childish. I always thought that it was stupid that Vegeta couldn't catch up to Goku. Goku leaping up into the clouds in terms of his power and effortlessly leaving everyone else in the dust has always been very annoying to me, and part of me finds it satisfying to hear Vegeta rant about it. It's almost fourth wall breaking, which is something Vegeta tends to do that I find hilarious. Vegeta refusing to accept his assigned role as a side character that can never be on Goku's level, which is something every other character just accepts, is almost cathartic to me. He's kinda preaching to the choir here, and I strongly suspect that many fans feel the same way. Why is Goku some kind of godlike character that continues to outpace everyone? Even Vegeta, a character who was introduced as an incredibly gifted fighter that was stronger than any Saiyan on their home planet. I told you what I like about this arc, or what's tolerable about it, and now I'll tell you why it doesn't work. The stupid backsliding towards Vegeta's character development is what ruins this for me. He kills all these people at the tournament when it wasn't even remotely necessary, and then later goes on this childish rant about how he misses being evil. Vegeta just loved being evil so much that he couldn't even stay good for one day, guys.
And enjoy your grand prize, a lifetime supply of
Evil.
Just took it to my veins!
Vegeta, you bad, bad man. Why can't you just be a good boy? I mean, I don't particularly want him to be super good, but as usual, he takes it way too far. I guess he'd been a good guy for 7 years, but the audience doesn't see that. We saw him as a good guy for one day, and then he's immediately killing innocent people. He didn't even kill anyone when he came to Earth the first time. Nappa was the one who killed everyone. So Vegeta's worse in the Buu saga than he was when he came to Earth over a decade ago? Interesting. The really stupid thing is they try to frame it like Vegeta's killing these people to antagonize Goku into fighting him, as though that were necessary. That's incredibly stupid. That's like being in a bar fight with someone, and instead of just attacking the guy you want to fight, you pull out a gun and start shooting a bunch of people. Now you have to fight me. Look at all these people that I killed. Well, I probably would have fought you anyway if you just attacked me. Oh. It's a good thing that Dragon Balls can just fix this later. Right? This whole spiel Vegeta gives about how he missed being evil is stupid, and I don't like it. Vegeta struggling with the dichotomy of his past life and his current peaceful life isn't necessarily a bad idea. It's believable to me that he might feel caged on Earth, or that he would worry that his feelings for his family are a weakness. Vegeta had a very different, horrifying life before he came to Earth, so it makes sense that at some point he would struggle with these sorts of feelings during his character development. Him struggling to come to terms with who he was and who he is now is completely understandable. But why is he doing that now? And why is he talking to Goku about it? This is more something that he should have discussed with Bulma years ago. I'm not crazy about Vegeta struggling with this now, because I think he should be past this already. He's been on Earth for 10 years at this point. But the really annoying thing is that even if Toriyama wanted to explore the side of Vegeta now, he could have, without making Vegeta completely irredeemable. Vegeta could have thought about killing those people to antagonize Goku, and maybe even almost did it. I like the idea of Vegeta's willpower being so strong that Babidi cannot control him, but I also think it would have been cool if Babidi's magic had some influence on Vegeta's thoughts or feelings. Vegeta was a very bad person for a long time. He did some really terrible things. and he liked doing it. Vegeta could have remembered the thrill he felt when he hurt and dominated people who were weaker than him. And for a moment, he wanted to experience that again. Babidi's magic could have been influencing him a little bit. But then he sees Bulma in the crowd and remembers conversations that they've had. "You're not like that anymore," Vegeta remembers Bulma saying. "You're a good man now, and a good father. I love you." He looks at Bulma. He thinks about his son, and with his impressive willpower, not his pride, he resists Babidi's influence, and decides not to kill anyone. He looks back at Goku and remembers how this low-class warrior keeps outpacing him, no matter how hard he trains. Vegeta feels humiliated and angry. He's still going to fight Goku, no one is going to stop him from doing that. He doesn't care about Buu, and reasons to himself that there's no way Buu's that strong anyway. It won't be a problem. Vegeta can still be in the wrong, and he can still advance the plot without going way too far. And here lies one of the problems with Toriyama's writing. He doesn't understand subtlety or depth, and he cannot write a character with complicated motivations. Toriyama prioritizes advancing the plot over character development, whether it be because he doesn't care, or he doesn't have the skill as a writer to use Vegeta effectively in the story. Whatever the reason, it's written very badly. And what's really stupid about Vegeta killing these people and insisting that he's evil again is that he immediately regrets doing this when he realizes that Buu is a lot stronger than he thought. He has this brief moment where he realizes he was wrong and apologizes to nobody. And then he goes and makes this heroic sacrifice that accomplishes nothing. Vegeta dies and Buu just comes back to life. And you might be thinking, well, it's the thought that counts. No, that's not good enough. What was the point of him killing those people if he was just going to instantly regret it? Why couldn't he have just not done it to begin with? There's this weird illusion that Vegeta has gradual character development, and that he slowly changes over time. But if you pay attention to what actually happens in the show, that's not really true. He goes from not giving a crap about Trunks to having a meltdown when Trunks is killed in front of him. There was no indication that he cared before that moment. Not even subtle hints. This one I can forgive because it makes sense to me that someone as emotionally unhealthy as Vegeta wouldn't understand that he cared until the person that he cared about wasn't there anymore. But the problem is, this is always how Vegeta is written. He doesn't care and then he instantly cares. Why couldn't he have hesitated to kill those people? He obviously cares about his family, so why couldn't that have affected his behavior at all? Why didn't he wonder about what Bulma or Trunks would think? Why is Vegeta only allowed to change after he's been behaving terribly? I mean, he almost killed Bulma. She was right there. She easily could have died here, and Vegeta apparently wouldn't have cared in this moment. I'm sure he would have cared later, but she still would have been dead. Him doing something horrible and then regretting it is not good enough for me. He's already done enough bad things, and we never see him feel guilty about any of that. He didn't need to do anything else. He's already done enough bad stuff. Stop it. I just don't understand why Toriyama insists on writing Vegeta like this. He makes it crystal clear that Vegeta is evil, but then he wants to redeem him. You can't do both of those things. Pick one. He's either a good guy or he's a bad guy. He cannot be both. And some people might say, well, that's what makes Vegeta such a great character. The fact that he's not really good or bad and he kind of walks the line and he goes back and forth. He's an anti-hero. Here's the thing. I really want that to be true, but it isn't. The only time Vegeta was an anti-hero was on Namek, which is arguably the time that he was used the most effectively in the story, aside from him just being a villain. But from the start of the Android Saga to the beginning of the Buu Saga, Vegeta is in this weird limbo state where he isn't a good guy, he isn't a villain, or at least he's not the main villain, and he's not an anti-hero either. He does not have a role, or his role is to cause chaos, which is normally something that a bad guy would do. So I guess Vegeta's role is a villain that occasionally helps the good guys? And no, that's not the same as being an anti-hero. Not to me. The reason I refer to Vegeta as a plot device so often is because that is clearly how Toriyama sees him. And the annoying thing is that Toriyama still could have used Vegeta this way if he insisted on doing it, without making Vegeta such a bad person. You can make Vegeta do bad things, and you can keep using him as a plot device. Lord knows you have to do that. Vegeta is apparently the most important character in this story, because without him the plot doesn't go anywhere. Vegeta can do bad things, he doesn't have to be 100% good. I don't even want him to be. He can be a dubious character with his own selfish motivations, but there is a line that he cannot cross if you ever want him to be a good guy. And this is a concept that Toriyama really just can't seem to grasp. He cannot write a complicated character. He does not know how. He does not have the skill as a writer. He does not know how to write an anti-hero character, or a character that kind of walks the line between being good and evil. He writes good characters, and he writes evil characters. And he doesn't know how to do anything else. And with no other character is this more perfectly illustrated than Vegeta. Vegeta's characterization and behavior throughout the show is full of contradictions and backsliding. The closest Toriyama ever got to effectively writing a complicated character was Piccolo or Tien. But even they're not great examples, because neither one of them was that bad, at least compared to Vegeta. And they both become good very quickly. I actually do have a lot of issues with how Piccolo is used in the story, and I'm gonna make a video about it. But this video is about Vegeta, and Vegeta is really in a tier of his own as far as bad writing goes. Vegeta insisting that he missed being evil is stupid, but it's not really the problem because it isn't true. He's lying. He does care about his family, and he does not want to go back to being evil. Or at the very least, he loves his family more than he likes being evil. Goku even calls him out on it. Vegeta's just like, I'm evil now, I don't care. And Goku's like, really, Vegeta? And Vegeta's like, shut up! It's all very stupid, because Vegeta does something terrible, something he arguably shouldn't be forgiven for. And he has this crisis that kind of comes out of nowhere, and then it's resolved immediately. There's no depth to any of it. I don't really care about what Vegeta says, I care about what he does. Normally I would say that actions speak louder than words, and I do think that's true, but Toriyama is such a bad writer that he can't even convey this very simple idea. Vegeta does care about his family, that's canon. But then, why did he kill those people? Why did he almost kill Bulma? The writing is so bad, God, Jesus, I can't. Look, I tried really hard to explain this. I specialize in making excuses for Vegeta's behavior, or trying to rationalize it. I've been doing it since I was a kid. I have a lot of experience. If there was a way to explain this, I would have found it. I can't do it. There is no way to explain it, and there is no way to fix it. It simply should not have been written like this. Vegeta has never been well written, but this is on another level. Toriyama has given me nothing to work with. He has written himself and Vegeta into a corner here. Vegeta's behavior is very contradictory and doesn't make any sense. I'm offended by how terribly written this is. This is my favorite character, and you're ruining him. Toriyama's a hack. Moving on. Are people gonna get mad at me for talking so much shit about Toriyama? I don't really care. I'm angry. Okay, let me calm down. Vegeta has a history of lying to himself and others about how he really feels. I think this is a combination of him sometimes not understanding how he feels, and him wanting to distance himself from what he considers to be weakness. On Namek, Vegeta says he does not care that his planet was destroyed. And later on he tells Frieza that he was never obedient and that he was always just biding his time and waiting for the right moment to overthrow him. Sure, Vegeta, whatever you say. I'm sure that Vegeta was planning to betray Frieza for a very long time, maybe even from the beginning. But he was still subservient for years because he had no choice. I still consider him saying this to be an example of him lying to himself and Frieza to appear stronger. Or it's an example of him denying reality, which is a state that Vegeta really likes to be in.
I reject your reality and I substitute my own.
When Vegeta fails to defeat Frieza and live up to the ridiculous expectations that he has for himself, which would be attaining a godlike power and defeating the most powerful being in the universe that enslaved him and took everything from him, he gives up. He won't fight back anymore, and he breaks down and cries. He doesn't even try to stop himself from crying because he doesn't care anymore. He knows he's failed, he knows he's dying, and he's given up completely. It's part of what makes his death so sad. We never see Vegeta more broken than he is here. Then, for maybe the first time in his life, he's honest about how he feels. He tells Goku how Frieza controlled him and used him and their people. Frieza killed his father and destroyed their planet. Oh, but Vegeta doesn't care about that. He doesn't care that Frieza blew up his planet and killed all his people and took everything from him. Yes, I know that that's what Toriyama wants us to think, but that doesn't really make any sense. If he doesn't care, why is he telling Goku about it? Why is he crying? Why is it so important to him that Frieza be defeated by a fellow Saiyan? He's dying. Why does he still care about this? Vegeta is attempting to help Goku defeat Frieza in the only way that he still can, by giving Goku motivation and telling him what he thinks Goku needs to know in order to transform. He is transferring his responsibility, his burden of defeating Frieza, to Goku as his last dying wish. Broken and desperate, Vegeta begs Goku to defeat Frieza. He used me and our people. We obeyed him and he betrayed us. He killed everyone. Please, by a Saiyan's hand. And then he dies. Now after all that, you expect me to believe that he didn't care? Give me a fucking break. Vegeta's death scene is pretty self-explanatory. It isn't hard to figure out why he's upset. And I think the scene works better without Goku adding this commentary about how Vegeta didn't care about his people and he just didn't like being told what to do. This comment is very unnecessary. It doesn't add anything to the scene. If anything, it detracts from it. The audience needs to feel sorry for Vegeta, or at least to pity him in this moment, and to understand that even though Vegeta is a bad person, that Frieza is the real villain here. Toriyama has opened a door and shown us that there's more to Vegeta than we had previously assumed. I strongly disagree with Toriyama's decision to make Vegeta's pain be mostly related to his pride. It makes Vegeta less interesting and less sympathetic. It would have been fine if Vegeta had died here as a sympathetic or pitiful villain, but because Toriyama brings Vegeta back and none of this pain we'd seen him express here is further explored throughout Vegeta's character development, it doesn't work very well. Vegeta is a very bad person. He's done a lot of really terrible things, and redeeming him isn't an easy thing to do, but it's not impossible. One of the frustrating things about how Vegeta is written during his death scene is that Toriyama has been laying down the foundation for Vegeta's redemption for a while, making it so that he's not the big bad and introducing other characters that make Vegeta seem not as bad by comparison was a step in the right direction. I really like the Ginyu Force. I think they're some of the funniest, most entertaining villains we ever saw in the show. The idea of a super elite team made up of different aliens all across the universe, or whatever, with unique abilities is pretty cool. We saw on Earth how powerful Vegeta was. Goku couldn't even defeat Vegeta on his own, and many of the main characters died in the battle with Vegeta's subordinate Nappa. And the remaining characters barely managed to survive their final encounter with Vegeta. So Vegeta has been introduced as this incredibly powerful character that even Goku was no match for alone. But when we get to Namek, it's clear that Vegeta isn't really that impressive in the grand scheme of things, and that there are many other characters that are even stronger than he is. Despite Vegeta's power-ups, the Ginyu Force is on an entirely different level, and even the way they talk to Vegeta is very condescending and rude. They call him Vegeta-chan. As a kid, I didn't realize how disrespectful this was, but in my defense, I think part of that was because back in the early 2000s, when DBZ was at the height of its popularity, there were many fans, mostly young girls I imagine, simping for him, who were always giving Vegeta stupid pet names, like Vegeta-chan or Veggie-chan. That kind of talk was everywhere on the internet, especially in the copious amounts of fanfiction that I was reading at the time. I just had to know how Vegeta and Bulma got together, you guys, and how their relationship progressed and how they eventually fell in love. And I clearly wasn't the only one who felt that way, because there was a lot of Vegeta and Bulma fan content back then. Far more than there is now. It was everywhere. And I was so into that pairing as a preteen and a teenager. It was like my Twilight. Except not garbage. Well, some of it was really bad. But some of it was really good. I do like romance a lot. I mean, I am a girl. But I'm not much for rom-coms, and I don't tend to just ship characters for no reason. The relationship has to be believable to me, and I have to already like at least one of the characters, which is why fanfiction has always been right up my alley. Expanding on ideas or characters and stories that I am already interested in is very appealing to me. But having said all that, a lot of those fanfics were very badly written, and there were definitely more poorly written stories than good ones. Vegeta-chan, I love you. Vegeta no Oji smirked arrogantly. Shut up, Baka Ona. I must defeat Kakarata yo, Kasama. The weebs were everywhere, you guys. So even though I thought it was kind of dumb, I got so used to the chan suffix that it didn't really register as an insult to me. Using the suffix chan to refer to a grown man may not be something that translates into English very well, but trust me when I say that the Ginyu Force is being very insulting when they refer to Vegeta this way. The only characters that ever talk to Vegeta like this are Bulma's mother and the Ginyu Force. Even Bulma calls him Vegeta-kun, she doesn't call him Chan. And she's teasing him when she talks to him like that, but she still doesn't call him Chan. The funny thing is, Bulma's mother does not mean it in an insulting way. She adores Vegeta, and she would not intentionally disrespect him. And Vegeta knows that, which is why he doesn't react to it. Bulma's mother is kind of an airhead, and she talks to everyone like that anyway. So it doesn't have the same meaning for her. But when the Ginyu Force talks to Vegeta that way, they are essentially treating him like a toddler. They're basically like, "Little Vegeta thinks he can play with the big boys? How cute."
Yo, Vegeta. Sa, Vegeta-chan. かわいそうにベジータちゃん。いいぞ、なかなかいいぞ、ベジータちゃん。さすが昔フリーザ様に可愛がられていただけのことあるな。でもどうして裏切ったんだい、ベジータちゃん。
Their behavior comes across almost as high school bullying, which is both hilarious and kind of scary. And here we have one of the first steps towards making Vegeta somewhat relatable, or somewhat sympathetic. The idea that Vegeta was really more of a big fish in a small pond, and that he perhaps did not command the level of respect that we had previously assumed, expands the world and adds more depth to Vegeta's character. Frieza mentions favoring Vegeta, and I don't doubt that that's true. Vegeta was the strongest of the Saiyan people as far as Frieza knew, and he's royalty. Frieza has essentially owned Vegeta since he was a child, so it makes sense that he would view Vegeta as a prized pet or a trophy that he enjoyed keeping around to remind him of his conquest of the Saiyan people. It would also be a power trip for Frieza to eradicate all the Saiyans, including the women, so they would eventually completely die off, while keeping the best one for himself and using Vegeta to expand his empire. Very arrogant of him to keep the strongest one alive and assume that Vegeta would always obey him, but Frieza is a sick, egomaniacal monster. I do think that Frieza thought more highly of Vegeta than the typical Saiyan, but he still clearly didn't think very highly of them as a people. He refers to them as monkeys several times throughout the show, and when he's torturing Vegeta, he mentions being disappointed to learn that Vegeta was just as stupid as the rest of them, and says that the Saiyan people were never good for anything other than fighting. Given Frieza's attitude towards Saiyans and the power he commanded and the fear he must have instilled in others, it's safe to assume that this negative attitude towards Saiyans would have been held by others, even other soldiers in Frieza's army. I'm sure that Vegeta did command a lot of respect, but there's no way everyone respected him, especially characters that were stronger than he was. And it seems very likely to me that he would have encountered racism or bigotry during his time serving Frieza. The idea of Vegeta experiencing hatred or mockery simply for being what he is could also partially explain why Vegeta is so proud of his heritage. because his only other option would be to feel shame, which is weakness. Vegeta values strength above everything else, so of course he would not allow himself to feel ashamed. I always thought Vegeta's pride as a Saiyan would have made a lot more sense if he did care about his people, because there are so few Saiyans left, so he knew that he was representing them, keeping the memory of them alive, and he would want to appear strong while doing that. And he's also royalty, so why wouldn't he be arrogant about that? Anyway, the Ginyu Force and Frieza are a bunch of assholes, but part of me appreciates these characters because their relationships with Vegeta add complexity to his character. Recoome is essentially bullying Vegeta here, and being bullied is something many people can relate to. And if you're a bit older, having a job or a boss that you don't like is quite relatable as well. The seeds have been planted just as they were planted earlier when we learned that Vegeta's people were killed and his home planet was destroyed by Frieza, who Vegeta has been working for this whole time. Vegeta's entire redemption hinges on this very basic premise. How do you redeem an irredeemable character? You introduce another character that's even worse. Krillin even spells this out for us clear as day later on. Yes, Vegeta's bad, but he has to be better than Frieza. Right? Yes, Krillin, that is in fact how this works. It's how it has always worked for every previously redeemed villain, and it's how it will continue to work for future villains finding redemption. The whole, yeah, that guy's bad, but that other guy's even worse trope may be overused. But as the old saying goes, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Vegeta is no longer the threat here. He's working together with the heroes to defeat these much more powerful enemies. Vegeta's new role in the story as an anti-hero, and his new dynamic with the other characters, has made things more interesting. Vegeta's obvious fear of facing off against Frieza, who Vegeta does not truly believe he can defeat at this point, also makes the threat seem more real, and adds a level of tension to that inevitable confrontation. The idea of Vegeta having a somewhat believable or justifiable redemption further culminates in their final fight with Frieza, where Vegeta suffers a humiliating and cruel defeat. We knew that Vegeta was working for Frieza, but during his death scene we learn how hard that was on Vegeta. How he had really been more of a slave than an employee. This is a man who had been used his whole life by a monster, and had everything taken from him when he was a small child. His father, his people, his planet. I have mixed feelings about whether the dub handles this better, or whether the sub does. I don't think either translation really does Vegeta justice. My issue with the official Japanese translation is how it goes out of its way to explain that Vegeta didn't care about his people, and that he just hated obeying Frieza. This is perhaps the first example of Toriyama intentionally making Vegeta less interesting, by reducing his motivation to pride. He does this a lot with Vegeta as the story progresses, but it started here. Goku, or Toriyama's mouthpiece, saying this is yet another example of Toriyama not understanding show don't tell, because he's telling us something that doesn't seem to match what we're seeing, or what we're hearing Vegeta say. Or maybe it's just bad storytelling. We can infer things about Vegeta's true feelings based on his behavior and what he says, but then Goku's just like, nah, he didn't care about any of that, he only cared about this. It's just pure nonsense. Especially when you look at Vegeta's arc as a whole, the idea that he didn't care about any of his people at any point in his life makes no sense because he eventually cares about Bulma and his son, so he's obviously capable of caring about others. In Super, he even gets to the point where he doesn't want to go train on another planet because he doesn't want to miss the birth of his daughter. He's like, I can't leave, Bulma won't forgive me. Which suggests that he feels guilty about how poorly he treated Bulma and Trunks early on. Bulma doesn't even tell him not to go train, he decides that on his own, which is pretty incredible. Vegeta's arc may not be well written, boy howdy am I aware of that, but there's no denying that he changes a lot over the course of the story. So it had to have been his life experiences and his environment that made him the way that he is. And even if we accept the ridiculous notion that Vegeta was always just pure evil and never cared about anyone, he would still care that something that belonged to him, his kingdom, was taken away, even if it was for selfish reasons. So I really don't buy the idea that he didn't care, even though Toriyama basically says that he didn't care. I would believe that Vegeta convinced himself that he didn't care as a coping mechanism, That actually makes a lot of sense, but I don't believe for 1 second that he genuinely did not care, and I never have. Toriyama has all of this interesting backstory and emotional baggage to work with, but he chooses to ignore it and write Vegeta in a very simplistic way. Oh, it's not that Vegeta cared about having everything taken from him, his father, his people, his kingdom, or that he felt like it was his burden to defeat Frieza and he felt like a failure for not avenging his people. He just didn't like being told what to do. Goku explains this to us because we're too stupid to figure out Vegeta's motivation on our own. We need to have that spelled out for us like we're 5 years old. And the explanation has to be as simplistic and boring as possible. I guess it was just hurt pride. Oh. I thought that it was a little more complicated than that. Thanks for clearing that up for me, Goku. Vegeta's just such a proud man that it hurt his pride to obey Frieza. And he's so proud that he wanted to defeat Frieza on his own, and when he couldn't do it, he cried. The dub does try to mitigate some of these problems by making it clear that Vegeta did care that his planet was destroyed, and that he cared about his father. It lays a lot of the blame on Frieza, and tries really hard to make Vegeta seem like a victim.
He took me from my father when I was just a little boy. He made me what I am. Don't let him do it to anyone else.
I prefer the Japanese version of DBZ, and I am always talking about the Japanese translation unless I state otherwise. I'm bringing up the dub because it was the version that I watched first, and despite Savitz's not-so-stellar voice acting,
Oh, my freaking ears!
and the mistranslation, Vegeta's English death scene is the version that originally had the most impact on me. As an adult, part of me still appreciates the extra effort the dub made to make Vegeta more sympathetic. But unfortunately, the dub has its own issues because it goes too far in the other direction. I don't like the idea of Vegeta not accepting responsibility for his past actions, and he comes across as a little too pathetic in the dub. There isn't a proper balance between either translation, in my opinion. One doesn't go far enough, and the other goes too far. Yes, Vegeta is a bad person. Yes, Vegeta has done terrible things, and there is no excusing it. But despite what Toriyama insists on telling us through Goku, there's more going on here than hurt pride. Vegeta was most certainly heavily influenced by his violent environment and upbringing, and Frieza was definitely a very negative influence on him. He wasn't born evil, and he would have been different if he'd had a different life. That has to be true, or his redemption does not make any sense. I'm not done talking about this, not by a long shot, but the video is getting very long, so I'm going to end it here and make a third part. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe and share the video around so maybe I can get some views. These videos take a while to make and I'm putting a lot of effort into it, but I guess it's hard to get attention on YouTube when you're just starting out. Any help would be appreciated. I'm just gonna keep making videos though. I have lots of ideas for other videos. I plan to make a Piccolo video. And I'll be reviewing other movies and shows as well. Here's a stupid music video I made making fun of myself for not being able to make short videos. Enjoy.
This is the song that doesn't end. Yes, it goes on and on, my friend. Some people started singing it, not knowing what it was, and they'll continue singing it forever just because this is the song that doesn't end. Yes, it goes on and on, my friend. Some people started singing it, not knowing what it was, and they'll continue singing it forever just because this is the song that doesn't end.
How do I turn you off?
Yes, it goes on and on, my friend.
Okay.
Some people started singing it, not knowing what it was, and they'll continue singing it forever.
I can't believe you guys. Okay, I've had it. That's it. That's it. What are you doing? What is this? Hey! No. This is the last time, right? This is it. This is it. This is it. This is not funny. Okay, if you guys are gonna keep that up, I won't